But having said that, none other than one of the senior-most brain surgeons of the city, who's been a debating stalwart and a debating partner of myself for decades, Dr. Sandip Chatterjee. Just before you start, Sandip, we've got lots of speakers on CDC channel on YouTube Live. So this debate is going on YouTube Live. We've got to stick on time. Thank you.
Talking about time, I heard this story about two priests whose arguments were really weak, and they still had to preach. And one said, "My argument is so weak, I never stop when my time is up. I continue." And he said, "How long do you continue?" The other one asked. And he said, "I continue till I find people looking at their watches." The other said, "When the argument is weaker, I carry on even more when they look at their watches." And he said, "When do you stop?" He said, "When they take their watches off their wrist, hold it against their ear and shake it to see was it working." And so, Mr. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, we've had two examples of two priests who waited for you to look at your watches and hang it next to your ear, so you can well understand how strong their argument must be. Is the press so oppressed that they need to prostrate themselves to please rather than to present? Suppressed, oppressed, or depressed they may be, but their job is to present. And it is through the medium of presentation that they may seek to please or displease. Presenting is the primary aim of journalism. Pleasure or displeasure is the secondary result. And that is the sum and substance of our argument from this side. If you want to look at the beauty of a flower, you have to see the color of its petals. If you have to appreciate the ferocity of a tiger, you have to see its snarls and its nails and its fangs. If you have to understand the nature of a politician in Calcutta, you have to check whether he's red or saffron or blue. Only after you see the presentation can you decide whether you will be pleased or displeased with the creature in front of you. And hence, presentation is the first thing that a journalist has to do. Pleasure, pleasing, displeasing occurs thereafter. But in fact, there is more to that. And that was a point that Anand Ranganathan's speech reminded me of. He said, in Calcutta, how do you please your political bosses in Bengal and Delhi at the same time? The answer is you can't. Because this state, we've always had, as I've said before, two elephants, one elephant from a tribe in the center, another elephant from a tribe in the strait, fighting it out on the grasslands of Bengal. And when two elephants fight, it is always the grass that suffers. Imagine the poor journalist standing in the middle of the trampled grass, having to decide which leg of which elephant is responsible for trampling more grass. That presentation is likely to endanger his life, his liberty, his job. Which brings me to another point. Pleasing and presenting, paradoxically, may be a point of view. Let's start with an example. But before I do so, the answer is found in the word presenting itself. Long before Austin and Gaskin described PowerPoint presentation, medieval Latin used the word presentation in the word presenter. And presenter in Latin means to showcase. The word showcase means you show some part and you case some part. Therefore, every presentation has a personal bias And when we talk about presentations, every presentation by every journalist is clothed in personal bias. Do not think, like the members of the other side have been trying to tell you, that there is objectivity in journalistic presentation. To my mind, the last time an objective presentation was made in this country was when Sanjay described the war to Dhritarashtra. There has never been objective presentation by anybody after that. James Augustus Hickey was the second person to try it in the soils of Bengal in 1780, when he started the Bengal Gazette, the first newspaper in this country. And he said, all reporting will be objective, no subjective reporting. They started reporting the truth against the British. In 2 years' time, the office was burned down close and the paper packed off. That's the trade-off and the conflict between principles and practice of journalism. And I will remind you of that. But coming back to the paradox of presenting and pleasing being two sides of the same coin, let's look at an example. Here in Bengal, a Trinamool leader of the Panchayat is found dead outside his home, lying in a pool of blood. What would a narrative be? The narrative would be a Panchayat leader of the Trinamool was found dead outside his home, lying in a pool of blood. The cause is being investigated. It always makes me intrigued that the police take a few months to find out who the murderer is. Our courts of law take a few years to put the right people in jail, as we've seen. But the media diagnoses the cause of death and the murderers within seconds of appearing on the scene. And I do not see sometimes the need of having either press or courts when we have the media to do the job. So here's the media. This is a media that owes allegiance to the local governments here. They arrive and say, this Trinamool Panchayat leader has been brutally murdered by the opposition members from the BJP, possibly with help even from the Congress and the left front. And they have all brutally murdered this man outside his home. Then comes the media with its allegiance to the center. And they say, this man was found dead outside his home. It is accused that the BJP did it. But the truth is, this is an internal faction feud of the Trinamool that has caused his death. So when the first media is looked upon by his bosses in the state, that media person is said, look, he's presenting facts. But when the second media comes and says, the bosses in the state say, he's pleasing, he's not presenting. So that is our second point, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasing and presenting are paradoxically two different points of view, depending on whom you owe allegiance to. In fact, I have to at this time point out the Right Honorable Mr. Saket, who talked about the role of the media and offered kudos to the Telegraph, thus proving the very point that journalism in the Telegraph and other newspapers actually present, they do not please. Thank you for making the point from our side. Even most powerful was the speaker who followed, Shama Muhammad. I sat open-mouthed throughout her whole speech, trying to work out what Afzal Guru, Azmal Qasam, atrocities against journalists, Manipur, Rahul Gandhi's travel across the country had to do with the topic. Till, ladies and gentlemen, I realized why I was open-mouthed. We all stay open-mouthed longer than we want when we are in the company of dentists. In fact, Mr. Chairman, sir, so used to have we become to the idea of having news that is not objective, that we have coined a term called fake news. How can a news be fake? It's an oxymoron. It's like talking about a satanic god or a poison delicacy or a sinful member of the Calcutta Club. You can look for one, you'll never spot one. So, ladies and gentlemen, to sum up, keep to time and not have you look at your watches or shake them like they did. Our point is two very clear. First, the press has to present. That is the primary job. The presentation can please some and displease some. They do not please or displease first. They present first. Secondly, whether you think they're presenting or pleasing depends on whether you are wearing clothes that are red, blue, or saffron underneath. And therefore, there is no absolute term like presenting or like pleasing. And there I rest our case. Thank you very much.
Sandip, thank you. Thank you. As good as ever. And it was so pertinent that Sandip revoked James Augustus Hickey, who published the first newspaper from Kolkata. And Sandip, we as surgeons must never forget that James Augustus Hickey was a failed surgeon in Ireland, and only when he failed in surgery did he take to journalism, come to Chatpal Ghat and jump ship. And that is how the first newspaper publication starts in Bengal. Strangers are the alleys of history.